Air Marshal, welcome to RUSI. As you can see, we have a packed hall, so they're waiting with eager anticipation for your remarks. And I think you've already had reporting of your speech even before you've made it, which seems to be the way we do things today, which I'm sure has further increased the level of anticipation. It's a common theme in defence discourse today, and in the UK in particular, that the level of contestation, especially between states, is increasing, but also that it's becoming more complex and less certain. Of course, concerns about Russia and China or about terrorist groups are not new. Even so, I think it's fair to say that some of the assumptions that we took for granted for a significant period in relation to those threats and potential threats are coming under challenge to an extent really not seen for many years in the security of this country. And certainly there is a sense that direct threats reaching deep within our own societies are being seen in a way that we haven't seen for a long time. Most obviously in recent months, the Salisbury attacks, but also the interference in the election in the United States and indeed in European countries, and the relatively low entry costs for launching cyber attacks, as we saw last year in relation to the National Health Service in the UK. The government has already published its National Security Capability Review, in which its fusion doctrine exemplifies the need for a cross-government approach being more important than ever, and emphasising the growing role of intelligence agencies, including defence intelligence, in responding to the new and complex challenges we face. Of course, we still await the outcome of the defence component of that review, the Modernising Defence Programme. But what I think we already know, what we know not least from the title of that review, is this is not simply about which bits of our existing capabilities we preserve, but even more importantly, where we need to modernise, where we need to accelerate the pace of change in the Ministry of Defence, if, as an ambitious but relatively small power, we are not to be left behind by others, by our adversaries, or indeed by our allies. And a critical element of modernisation of defence must be having a sophisticated understanding of new challenges. But actually just as important is our ability in the information space to respond to new circumstances and create asymmetric advantages of our own when we can. So with all this in mind, I'm delighted to have Air Marshal Phil Osborn, whose role as Head of Defence Intelligence, I think for just over 3 years now, has placed him in a unique position to contribute to these critical national debates and explain to us the contribution that defence intelligence makes to our national capabilities. He, of course, took his position not long after one of the most critical turning points of recent history, the Russian aggression in Ukraine and the robust initial NATO response to that aggression. But a lot has happened since January 2015 in Syria, in the UK, and more broadly. So I'm going to, I hope you all look forward to his remarks. Just to remind you all of the rules, the RUSI rules for this event. Phil's initial presentation will be on the record, but the subsequent Q&A will be off the record. Phil, over to you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. It's always disappointing when the moderator gives a far better presentation than the individual who's been asked to offer himself up for peer critique. However, we'll give it a go. As ever, it's good to be at RUSI, and thank you for inviting me back. To be honest, it doesn't happen to me much. However, despite being obviously grateful to be here. I must confess some trepidation. The Rewsy audience is always extremely high quality, and I can see that today is absolutely no exception. You see how I did that. Also, I am particularly grateful to the Times for describing me today as a spy chief, which means that for the first time in over 30 years, Mrs. Osborn has been even vaguely impressed with me. Unfortunately, I suspect it's just momentary. As Malcolm mentioned, I've been the Chief of Defence Intelligence for some 3.5 years now. And over that period, I've had privileged insight into the growth in both the importance and capability of intelligence, of counterintelligence and of cyber within defence and across government. Indeed, it has been a constant honour to work with some of the highest quality public servants, military and civilian, within defence and the wider MOD and across government and allies. Unsurprisingly, perhaps, I want to pay particular tribute to all of those within the UK's intelligence community, whether they be in defence intelligence or the wider defence, in the Joint Intelligence Organisation, the agencies, or the other intelligence assessment organisations in government. Our nation and our allies could not hope for a better group of people to understand and then help manage what we would all agree is an increasingly dangerous world. And it's that more dangerous world and the role of intelligence and information that I've been asked to reflect a little upon. But firstly, a few words of caution. My perspective, just like everybody else's, has bias. Mine is born of over 35 years of military service and, within my current role, a focus on the risk of instability and conflict. It is the nature of defence and of defence intelligence that we do not spend long observing nations and non-state organisations that are living peacefully. Hence, there is a risk that my perspective tends to be a little darker than those of colleagues in, say, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. The good news, I hope, is that as an intelligence professional, albeit still a relatively fledgling one, I hope I'm aware of and hence compensate for that bias. The second word of caution is that much of what I will cover is my personal perspective and is not endorsed MOD policy, and this is right. We in defence have yet to complete our modernising defence work, and hence it would be inappropriate to draw detailed conclusions from what I will say. It also means that I may stick to generalities during questions. I'll also try to be clear where I cannot or perhaps will not answer specific questions. I'm sure you will understand. I'm also sure that much of what I will tell you is not new. Our Secretary of State, our Chief of Defence Staff, the Permanent Secretary and the Chiefs have all spoken recently on aspects of what I will touch on, as have others in government. However, what I hope I'll do is give you an individual perspective on what you have heard and have read previously, and perhaps some newer ideas to consider. Enough of an introduction. I think we all have a general sense that the world is strategically more dangerous, uncertain, and unpredictable, and that state-based threats have become more acute. This should not be a surprise. The 2015 National Security Risk Assessment highlighted the resurgence of state-based threats and intensifying wider state competition. Also, in her foreword to this year's National Security Capability Review, the Prime Minister confirmed this intensification and evolution of threats to the UK. However, on reflection, what we probably collectively underestimated in 2015 was the pace with which that risk would begin to mature. Some examples. It would have been unthinkable to imagine some 4 years ago that an ostensibly European nation would invade another. And we don't talk about Crimea much anymore. Just over 2 years ago, we would have assumed that an attack on the democratic process of a superpower wouldn't be much short of an act of war. Again, just over 2 years ago, you would accuse me of being alarmist if I had suggested that a nation just about to be admitted to NATO would suffer a state-sponsored attempted coup. You would also have scoffed if I'd suggested some 18 months ago that an entirely attributable proxy war between international and regional superpowers would be the norm in the Middle East. And just some 3 months ago, it would have been inconceivable to imagine that we would see a highly likely state-sponsored chemical weapons attack in a British city. I would observe that the nature of warfare is changing to something that is broader than previously. It is becoming more strategic and increasingly features continuous full-spectrum competition and confrontation, and with new, additional domains of warfare being firmly to the fore, some of which can directly target centres of strategic decision-making. We increasingly see a multi-layered and multi-speed strategic battlespace, a battlespace where it is possible to have open, positive collaboration in one lane, while waging an aggressive confrontation in another, while preparing and pre-positioning for some prospective conflict in the future. And within each of these lanes, activity is layered, each delivering part of a full-spectrum approach across physical and virtual, legal and for some illegal, and all occurring at different speeds, some focused on reaction or short-term opportunity, others playing out over a much longer period, positioning for influence or for advantage. Let's perhaps unpick this battle space a little further. Great power competition has returned and usually sets a strategic context, albeit uncertain, for lower-level regional power, state and non-state confrontation. Proxies are widespread and end states at every level differ. Put simplistically, the enemy of my enemy is my friend is an approach which may and may not be sustainable even from week to week. Now, a battle space that simultaneously features collaboration, confrontation and preparation for a prospective future confrontation is not new. Many collaborative international relationships are founded on a notion of deterrence, which requires the maintenance of credible, critical capabilities through time. However, the key words here are probably credible and through time. In important areas, prospective opponents already overmatch, or will soon, Western capabilities. This manifests itself in many areas, but the most acute is probably the inexorable pressure on our and allies' ability to operate at a time and place of our choosing. Some examples amongst many. We increasingly see a complex web of overlapping and integrated land, maritime and air defence systems in almost every area of prospective UK military operations, including Europe, reaching out hundreds and in some cases thousands of kilometres. There is also notable investment in counter space capabilities, threatening an increasingly non-discretionary domain of warfare. Secondly, we're also witnessing substantial growth in land and maritime attack capability. Many nations are developing significant non-strategic nuclear and conventional land attack missiles, in some cases capable again out to thousands of kilometres. Of note, ballistic missile proliferation is rife in many areas of the world, including the Middle East. And as well as holding critically important national infrastructure at risk, this capability will increasingly challenge our ability to base and resupply deployed forces. And finally, the proliferation and use of chemical weapons, some very sophisticated, is on the rise, a worrying trend that will complicate significantly future military operations. These examples and others underline that our ability to operate whenever and wherever we wish, and hence our ability to exercise the nation's will, is more challenging than we have experienced for decades. There is also a newer aspect to this multi-speed battlespace. We, of course, prepare for conflict for years. Capability development and training are core to defence. But this tends to be capability specific and battlefield agnostic. Generally, we do not know in detail where we will have to confront or fight next. Conflict tends to be measured in certainly weeks, usually months, and sometimes years. Today, all of this remains true, except in cyberspace. Depending on opposition capability and intent, and critically our resilience, a full-scale cyber confrontation could have the nationally strategic crippling effects in minutes and hours. Moreover, the preparation of the offensive and defensive aspects of this type of conflict will be time and resource consuming, may be measured over years, and will be battlefield specific, albeit that this battlefield will transcend geographic boundaries. Even coming in from those extremes, this difference in pace between the physical and virtual, particularly in an integrated context, will not just provide a significant challenge across the full range of defence activities, but most importantly, also in terms of understanding and strategic command and control. I talked to aggressive confrontation. We know that there is significant growth in information-based capabilities, such as offensive cyber and sophisticated information operations. Unconstrained by geography, these capabilities, when used, are often difficult to attribute, at least quickly. For some, this ability to wage hidden and difficult to attribute warfare in cyberspace and elsewhere brings the opportunity for them to be much more aggressive and to take risk. We can see numerous examples of this today. Unprecedented industrial espionage activity against the UK and allies. Private security contractors being used in high-end expeditionary warfare in Syria. Cyber attacks against national infrastructure and reputation across Europe. Information operations that attempt to pervert political process and frustrate the rule of law, and attempted assassinations. In sum, if we have an increased sense of strategic danger, and I regrettably think we should, it is the product of witnessing the combination of increasing capability and escalatory choice for many, and a growing intent in some to use these capabilities at higher levels of risk. The consequent risk of confrontation and miscalculation is rising. Which brings us to the so what. Well, I mentioned modernising defence, and you will know that this includes ensuring that we are as efficient and as effective as we can be in our approach and processes, taking advantage of best-in-class ways of working and technology to deliver the defence mission. There is, however, a more operational imperative, set against the increasingly challenging operational context that I have just described. Put bluntly, without change, we risk quickly falling behind in today and tomorrow's full-spectrum confrontation. This context demands that we are more strategic in our approach and that our capabilities are better tailored to this accelerating shift in operational environment. More of the same will not cut it. I said we must be more strategic. This continual confrontation across a multi-layered and multi-speed battlespace requires that we understand more comprehensively and then decide quicker than the opposition, that we have a better risk-benefit calculus, that we pre-position earlier, and then if necessary, we act sooner. We need to compete, sometimes proactively, and certainly not just observe. In this more complex battle space, risk-informed pace will secure the initiative, and to wait for risk to mature before action is to contemplate strategic failure. Now, there are many attributes to success in this context. For me, the priorities are strategic agility and adaptability, interoperability rather than interconnectivity, and information advantage from a resilient, integrated defence operational platform. Looking at strategic and agility and adaptability first, this will be required to execute the necessary and enduring strategic campaign across the multi-layered and multi-speed battle space. We will need to secure a deep and persistent understanding of a prospective opponent's strengths, weaknesses and options, and then develop, pre-position and employ our own capabilities for advantage, for defence and perhaps for deception. Those capabilities must be of themselves agile and capable of last safe moment deployment and employment to avoid being physically or virtually fixed. Our aim should be to understand first, to decide first, and then, if necessary, to act first, across the physical and virtual, to secure decision advantage and then operational advantage, seeking swift yet controlled exploitation of vulnerabilities and the proactive denial of opportunities. Deception and counter-deception will be critical, as will an understanding of not just the risk of action, but also the risk of inaction. What will also be important will be our ability to adapt. Relying on agility to cope with a shifting sense of warfare is not sustainable in the long term. We have to be able to adapt our thinking and capabilities as our prospective opponents adapt theirs. We must also view publicly available information as perhaps an operational domain, as the fight for the narrative is arguably as important as the actual fight. We need to have a convincing justification and narrative for our actions whilst countering opposition, disinformation and lies with the truth, both at speed and with releasable evidence. Throughout, we will need to be guided by a clear and utterly transparent sense of legality and proportionality. The second priority, for me at least, is the need for interoperability rather than just interconnectivity. In this full spectrum context, we will need to refine what we mean by joint, this time as an integrated, cross-government, full spectrum approach, essential to deliver fusion doctrine as set out in the March NSCR report. Of note, the relationship we have with the agencies is much more mature than ever, but there is always more that we can collectively do. We'll also have to redefine how we work with like-minded nations. We will want to integrate full spectrum effects with allies, building on and enhancing our strategic strength of working in alliances. As the cornerstone of our national security, NATO is overwhelmingly important here, and we need to help this incredible example of collaborative endeavour to remain contemporary. Both imperatives, working across government and working with allies, will require true interoperability in new ways of working. Interconnectivity, although essential and necessarily far better than today, will not be enough. The third priority is to deliver information advantage from a resilient, integrated defence operational platform. The concept of information advantage, still in formulation within defence, owes much to the thinking of previous and current commanders of Joint Forces Command, particularly around warfare in the information age, and now innovation, integration and information. Part of modernising defence, information advantage is a concept which of course encompasses the increasing employment of information and data-based capabilities. This audience will not need reminding of the exponential growth in this area, from information operations to offensive cyber. However, many of us believe that the aggressive application of machine learning, artificial intelligence, and quantum computing to full spectrum operations is likely to be as disruptive to modern warfare as air power was some 100 years ago. Happy birthday, Royal Air Force. Therefore, information advantage also encompasses enabling, through leading-edge AI tools, the intelligence and information-led, strategically agile approach to warfare that I described earlier. Strategic campaigning with the aim of understanding first, deciding first, and then acting first. Finally, axiomatic to information advantage is a resilient, integrated defence operational platform. No longer can we consider defence as separate operational and corporate organisations. The full spectrum defence threat surface encompasses the breadth of the defence platform at every level, including critical HR functions, finance and reputation. Moreover, an integrated defence operational platform provides the essential launchpad for full spectrum operations with resilient systems and ways of working, reputational defence and offence, and integrated strategic communications, all being pivotal factors in the delivery of full spectrum confrontation. So what might be the initial steps towards information advantage? Initial steps which will be important of themselves, but also set a strategic trajectory. We will need enhanced resilience across the integrated defence operational platform that I spoke to. This might include greater organisational and network resilience and an enhanced counterintelligence and security culture, as well as the more efficient and effective ways of working that are a fundamental part of modernising defence. Next, contemporary understanding is the beating heart of information advantage and strategic agility. Now, we have been working hard on improving our intelligence capability across defence, with defence intelligence transformation already delivering significantly higher influence, we would say, across defence and government. We will build on this by providing pervasive full-spectrum situational awareness, a continuously available intelligence picture, and more predictive and anticipatory intelligence. Our pervasive situational awareness will include understanding what has changed as well as what is happening. And our predictive and anticipatory intelligence will integrate the prospective actions of many different actors, enabling us to forecast better significant events and then deliver real-time indicators and warnings. Potential capability improvements would be aimed at ensuring analysts are focused on our most difficult analytical problems and that our situational awareness is truly ubiquitous. These improvements might include increased investment in artificial intelligence and machine learning to manage burgeoning data volume and velocity, and to enhance analytical techniques. Further broadening of our open source capability might be another improvement, as would investing in a blended mix of sovereign and commercial space, and also investigating the use of every platform as a sensor. Next, in those initial steps towards information advantage, I would highlight delivering interoperability and not just interconnectivity. Now, this is already underway with detailed engagement with agencies and within the Five Eyes community as we collectively look at working in an information advantage-like context. Possible capability themes here include participation in similar allied work and greatly enhancing defence's data link capability. Turning to effects, A key part of information advantage will be operations in cyberspace and across the electromagnetic environment. We continue to work in very close partnership with colleagues in GCHQ to deliver the nation's offensive cyber mission, looking at maximising the strengths of each of our organisations and investigating how we can grow the scale of our already significant offensive cyber capability. Other potential non-cyber capability examples include greatly improved mission data management capabilities and an enhanced land signals collection capability. Lastly, and probably most importantly, the major challenge around delivering information advantage is probably delivering strategic agility and adaptability. In fact, this agility and adaptability will be to bring to life the concept of strategic campaigning at pace and at a complexity previously unimaginable. In this, we should deliver an increasingly integrated strategic intelligence, planning and command and control function closely linked to training, mission rehearsal and capability acquisition. In this, multiple opposition, neutral and friendly courses of action will be integrated, offering interactive and adaptable choice in how to maximise opportunity and take advantage of vulnerability. This will build on our current, well-proven military strategic function and deliver an information advantage-enabled strategic headquarters. This approach might also provide further opportunity. A step up in strategic command and control capability is required for the defence of the 21st century. Is the same true of government? Is this the time for defence to facilitate understanding, planning, integration and then command and control at the national strategic level, at pace and across multiple full spectrum operations, thereby enabling the command and control behind fusion doctrine? Some closing comments, if I may. I have outlined an increasingly dangerous full-spectrum battle space, multi-level and multi-speed, which requires us to be more proactive to maintain the strategic status quo. This will need a more strategic approach, founded on understanding first, deciding first, and then acting first, with a commensurately different appetite for risk. This continuous strategic campaign should be enabled by information advantage, which will provide not just the information-based effects and tools, such as offensive cyber and information operations that I've talked about, but also the instruments to deliver understanding, decision, and then action advantage. And through a comprehensive understanding of the risk of action and inaction, enable the exploitation of vulnerabilities and the proactive denial of opportunities. Now, it's highly likely, an analytical phrase that some of you would recognise, it's highly likely that elements of this appreciation may prove to be off-beam, certainly in detail and possibly in some more major areas. However, regardless, there is a unique and broader defence role in any full-spectrum confrontation, broader and deeper, and certainly not zero-sum. While we will require far enhanced information capabilities, this should not be substantively at the expense of more traditional, conventional capabilities. There is a clear need for symmetric and asymmetric choice within a more challenging physical and virtual operating environment, and incorporating a far greater range of escalation options. This underlines the need to expand and modernise our more conventional capabilities, in addition to adding new information capabilities. British military personnel and equipment remain some of the very, very best in the world, and we should maximise their utility. Lastly, there is an immediate imperative for change. specifically to maintain pace both with the prospective opposition and with allies. I've deliberately not gone overboard on the opportunity and threat of artificial intelligence and machine learning, but to repeat myself deliberately, I am in no doubt that the application of these technologies will change warfare, as they will change our lives and society. The threat is obvious. What may be slightly less obvious is that by inevitably changing the way that we work, these technologies will also threaten one of our most important strategic strengths, specifically our ability to work with allies and partners. Our interoperability challenge will therefore be even greater than today, as our adapting ways of working must dock with those of our friends, most of whom will be applying similar information approaches, but at different speeds. If we fall behind either key allies and partners or prospective opponents, we will fall behind exponentially and likely irreversibly. Hence, the imperative to act, and act quickly, is compelling. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for allowing me to offer you my personal opinion. You have been very, very patient. I am now almost happy to take your questions.
Air Marshal, thank you so much for those personal reflections on where we are today. Absolutely fascinating, and a lot of meat there, and I will not even attempt to summarise them. We've already got a number of people in the audience who are bursting to ask questions. Do we have some roving microphones? Lincoln has got two, which is very impressive indeed. I think James Arbuthnot, actually, did you have a question? If you just wait for the microphone to reach you and introduce yourself. And just to repeat, we're now